صوت مش طالع. Okay, it's okay. Leave it without the audio. It's okay. Just broadcast, please. We're running late already. All right, so what we're covering today is how what we buy during the COVID crisis is different than what we bought before, and how that affects what companies are importing, exporting, trading internally, and so on. And to answer those questions, we have with us today Sebastian. He's the founder of LoadMe. So LoadMe specializes in transportation. Modes of transportation. So they're using technology in order to influence the transportation industry when it comes to goods. And goods could be from the chips and the cheese and the water that we eat as consumers, or other heavier items that manufacturing and others do. And that typically is done by huge trucks that go from place to place. And of course, they're supported by boats that do that. So what we're going to talk about today is how was it before COVID? What are things we used to buy before COVID, and how does that affect what's being traded today? And Sebastian will share with us from his experience because he's been in the sector for a long time as the founder of the technology startup LoadMe. So Sebastian, who are you and what do you do?
Hello, I'm founded 6 years ago the first logistics platform in Middle East. It's called LoadMe. And since then, I can say we're mapping trade, because when you're monitoring transport around in an area, you're actually also mapping the trade routes. So now I can say we're mapping the trade routes in the GCC while monitoring through a control tower. This is what LoadMe became today. We are acting as a digital broker in GCC, but we're also licensing our software within the world, especially in Asian countries.
All right, when you say mapping trade routes in the GCC, that reminds me of the traditional trade routes that have always been in the GCC, because there have always been trade routes throughout all of the Arab world, traditionally on, whether it's camels or by foot or so on. And now we're looking at that. So what are the typical trade routes? So independently of COVID, what are the typical trade routes that you see and that you process?
For each sector is different. I would say most interesting in the view of pandemic is trade routes of the FMCGs, the fast-moving consumer goods, because these are directly proportional with the people that live and with the people behavior. With people that live in a certain area, with the people and with the behavior. So these are based on the population that is today in a city like Riyadh. So based on the population that is today in Riyadh, there is a trade route that deliver raw materials for FMCGs and ready products, FMCGs, constantly.
Give us examples of what are typical FMCGs, like chips and cookies and water and.
So in the GCC, before the 90s, so whatever factories that are open here before the 90s, they will be established in Saudi Arabia. Like Procter & Gamble, Unilever, they will have, these are first entry in most of the markets, emerging markets, and they have their main production facilities in Saudi Arabia. The other, all the other new companies that are, came in the region after the 90s, in the 2000s, so there will be equally distributed, or maybe more distributed, more developed in UAE. Now, on the shelf, when you enter in a shop in any city in Middle East, there is a variety of products. And these products traveled from all over the GCC to reach to the shelf. The one from P&G, Unilever, maybe came from the Saudi production facilities. The one from Mondelez, Kraft Foods come from Bahrain. The one from Johnson & Johnson come from UAE. And
so
the
this
other
is
imported
specific. So they're not flown in from other countries. Those are manufactured within it. So raw material comes, if it's not local, so it's local raw material, imported raw material, and it's manufactured in the GCC, and then it's shipped on trucks to the warehouse.
For the fast moving consumer goods, maybe 80% are manufactured in the region. Because it's not efficient. It's a high consumption of, Oreo biscuits. So
it's a high number, Sebastian. I'm curious to see if the raw material is actually as high as well. So I don't know, but that's more of a manufacturing question.
Raw material also. So yeah, raw material. Most of it is imported. And what goes from here out, if we're talking macro, what goes from here out is oil product, and then a lot of products that are derived of the oil, plastic, chemicals,
like this. Detergents and whatever.
Aluminium is also going out. Sulfurous. So and the macro level. This is on the macro level, but in the and inside the GCC, there is an interesting story that each product could tell if it has a mouth or a registry. Some they want to have like an historical registry of the product journey up to the shelf, empowered by the blockchain, so to understand exactly what was the origin of that product. So until they reach to the shelf, they've been sourced from multiple places. Sometimes same brand, it has different stock that is produced locally and stock that is imported. But it's not that common. But detergents, a lot is manufactured here in the region. But it's different than the other
also
region.
For the viewers, if you have questions, you can ask in the Q&A. We'll go ahead and ask them as well. So if you have questions for what Sebastian is sharing and so on, please go ahead and ask them in the Q&A, then they'll be answered.
Maybe what's different from the other regions on these large factories is that they are very large and they address to 3-4 countries, 7 countries, the whole GCC area when they produce a product. And they ship to long distance by road. While in Europe, for example, the cost is high on per kilometer. So there is reshaped the structure of this. So there are more factories and smaller. So they reduce the long haul from the factory to the shelf.
And that's the business opportunity that you're working on growing, right? So there are large manufacturing facilities that create huge volumes that they need to ship from country to another. And that has traditionally been done basically on calls and email and WhatsApp. And then a company like yours comes in to somehow give that structure and visibility and payment as well.
Correct. We're digitalizing the end-to-end process of transportation. We're focused on large corporates, which deliver goods between factories or hubs and raw materials to the inbound to the factory. Yeah, that's what we do.
Okay.
And coming back to the shelf, you know, there is a portion in the price of the product that is the transport, this portion is the same also in Europe. If we're comparing with Europe, where I know also a few things about, is the same. Though there the product traveled. Here the fuel cost is much lower, but the portion is the same because here we ship to a longer distance. So it's reshaped. The fact that the fuel is cheaper did not reduce the price on the shelf. The transportation, let's say the transportation part of the price of the product is not lower in percentage. It's just they prefer to reshape the entire supply chain and to have larger factories.
Tell me more about what you saw has changed from a post-COVID. So what is there a change to the routes? Is there a change to the, obviously there's a volume change as well. And then if there's a volume increase, did it skew into what we know as consumers, such as groceries and things like this? Or what about other non-consumers, like on the manufacturing side as well? So tell us more about that. Are the routes different?
Situation is very, very dynamic, especially in the road transportation, very dynamic. What I will say today, it might not be valid tomorrow, or today already it's already changed. So borders are opening, then closing, then opening for 5 days, and open in one direction for food items only, but in the other direction they can bring any items. So it's very, very dynamic. So even there are goods to be sent, but there is no way for a driver to cross the border. Then there are after, I don't know, a few weeks, then you can cross the border. You can clearance. You can do the clearance of the goods. You can send the goods across the border, but without the driver. So you offload the goods to another truck, and then that truck will take the goods to the destination. So let's say we go to Riyadh. You're going to drive with an Emirati plate number truck all the way to the border. And at the border, a forklift will move the goods from one truck, from the Emirati truck to a Saudi plate number truck with a Saudi resident who came and picked up the goods. So this way, there is no human crossing the border. Only the goods will cross the border. But
there's still an intersection at the border, right? So humans have to move things from here to there.
Yeah.
But you have humans on one side of the country and humans on another side of the country. But they
so
are
in that free zone, there's still a little bit of risk of contact. But there is no human crossing the border.
All right. This is part of controlling the pandemic for that side.
Yeah, this is done before. In Iraq, for example, the border between Kuwait and Iraq before the pandemic, it's a standard procedure. There's no transporters from GCC who are even willing to consider to cross the border to Iraq. So there is an area specialized into shifting goods.
Free zone sort of thing.
I've seen in other wild countries, like in Africa, for example, they shift the goods by bicycle. I think
those are heavy stuff.
Heavy stuff by bicycle. And so they go with the truck into the border, and the distance between the border, which is like 5 kilometers, 3, 4, 5 kilometers, it's going to be done by bicycles. By local
like
people.
A basket.
It's if you'll go, you'll see. It's a common thing at the borders between the countries in Africa. There are people with bicycles, and they have in the back of the bicycle basket. And they're very fit. They're very fit. I think they can win the Tour de France easily. Because they do these shipments all the time, and with the heavy load in the bicycle. So these are extreme cases, but there are strange ways to cope with. Anyway, this thing is a standard operation from before between Kuwait and Iraq, and now it's adopted. Seems it will be adopted temporarily between UAE and Saudi. This is one example of what we're facing daily.
Okay, so one element here that you've highlighted, which is the border control for goods. So there are no the goods can move from one country to another, but the drivers, even if it's a single driver with a large capacity and it's only one driver going through, not like a plane that has 200 people, it's a driver going through, even that has stopped. So there are drivers on each side of the border, and the goods are exchanged, and then the drivers then go, one driver goes back to the original destination, and the other driver delivers to the warehouse or the other destination.
Yeah.
So that's one behavioral change that that you saw.
By sea. So sometimes we send goods to the neighboring countries by sea. So you send containers to Dammam, then it's offloaded in Dammam and distributed inside the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This is again something that I think never happened before.
How does that reduce it though?
Sorry?
How does that reduce contact?
Yeah, because the cargo will travel by a boat.
I see. Yeah.
So no one will get off the boat, I guess, when they reach to Dammam. Just the goods will be offloaded in the port, and then
and they move it. Yeah. Okay. So you're saying that things that were passed, that were used to be on land, now they go by sea, even if it's a close neighboring country.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens.
Such as from the UAE to Bahrain, is that what you said?
UAE to Riyadh can go also by sea, from Jebel Ali to Dammam, and then from Dammam on the road to Riyadh. This is an example. There are, temporary relaxation for items that go to for non-food items that goes to Saudi Arabia. That is to limit the traffic of drivers into the country, but that's also like on short term, because for example, you don't have ink, you cannot sell milk, because to fill up the bottles of milk, you need to print up the label. So you'll end up in stock shortages of something that in the end is related to a critical product. So it's you cannot just stop everything in a country. The industries are so interconnected, so globalized, that it's not working on long term. For sure, there's blockers in almost every factory if you close the borders. In almost any food factory, if you close the borders for non-food items. This is not a long-term solution. This is one challenge, so the crossing the border. Another challenge, more locally, more around us, I've seen there's less food consumed in the restaurants. even with the deliveries, are actually less than the food deliveries are less, looks to be less. I don't have real data on this, but they look to be less than they were before the pandemic. But groceries deliveries are in very high demand. So the food now travel from the warehouse direct to the house, or farm to kitchen, ideally. It will be the best direction. Before, it will travel to the shop or to the restaurant, and then it will be consumed.
So you're saying the food between the countries is less now?
No, I changed the geography now, and I'm talking about domestic.
So
inside the same country. Yes.
Okay.
And
because
I'm saying, like,
the volume of people is the same, and the hunger and 3 meals or 5 meals a day, whatever they are, those have not changed, whether it's in restaurant or at home.
No, but inside the city, like Dubai, a lot of the food. So we consume the same quantity of. Let's assume we consume the same quantity of food. But before, we were consuming more meals from the restaurants in a form or another than we were cooking at home.
And I think the fancier stuff has stopped. So, for example, hibachis and fajitas and so on, I can't cook those at home. It's going to it's beyond my skill set.
Yeah. So now you consume food home cooked. So that means you need groceries to cook the food, more groceries than you were buying before. So before, these groceries were part of them distributed to the hotel and restaurants.
Hotels and restaurants and so on, yeah.
And now you want the food not even from the shop, because that's again an unnecessary stop. You want the food directly. So Carrefour has a lot of orders during the lockdown, and the shop is not designed. When I don't know if you made an order from Carrefour, but you'll see you need these, and you put like $1,000. You end up with $1,000 dirham basket. But imagine you just put 2 tomatoes from there, 1 kg of apples, and sparkling water from the other side. So someone has to walk and collect all these.
Physically do that, yeah.
And before that, someone has to go and put them in the shop. And so it's an unnecessary stop. The shop from the warehouse should be already dispatched before they went to the shop.
Okay. So you're saying warehouse versus the supermarket. You're saying
from the warehouse,
the online orders would go straight to the warehouse now instead of to the shop. This is what you're saying. So the shop is for the physical consumers, and the warehouse is for the digital orders. This is what you're saying. Yeah,
the warehouse was initially designed for the shops, to supply the shops,
of course,
with the groceries. But now the shops are absolute. Now, if it is to be delivered directly to the kitchen, it should be delivered directly from the warehouse, which of course is not designed for that. It's not a fulfillment center in the proper way, but that's the shortcut, the optimal shortcut that should be, and ideally from the farm to the kitchen.
That's even a tougher strain on the supply chain. Is your company involved in the domestic transportation of goods?
Yes. Yeah.
So how does that? So you're talking about the domestic part. How has that changed?
So in
volume,
the food
frequency, categories of content categories of goods moved.
In the food, there's a shift in the food. Most of the other sectors stopped or reduced drastically.
Like what?
Like construction materials, steel, gypsum carton, cement. All these. Not stopped, not. Just reduced, not drastically reduced. I would say just reduced, because the pandemic came so fast on us that there's still orders on the orders done. Factories actually all had orders spending, and they just need to stop, but they still have orders and they still have work even today. There's no
do you have numbers,
shortage.
Sebastian? Because even if you don't now on our call, I would recommend that you publish something as your company say, look, we observed a 37% decrease in this category and 12% increase in that, and so on. So those that type of numbers
on our customers I have, and maybe can be extrapolated on the industry that they represent. I don't know if that will be the country or the region.
What I recommend you structure that average. Domestically, we observed a 28% increase in groceries, 32% in this, and because you mentioned now like construction goods and cement and whatever, we saw 12%, 8%, and so on.
Yeah, so in the food, and I've seen the shift. So in the food industry, volumes remain the same, but they shifted from large vehicles to small vehicles because they were not to be transferred from the warehouse to the shop, but they were to be transferred from the warehouse or from the shop to the consumer. So vans, refrigerated vans.
Your company will be refrigerated vans?
Refrigerated vans are in demand. So these are like a 1-ton van, refrigerated, which is needed to distribute food items to consumer, groceries to consumer.
But your company deals with refrigerated vans as well, right? This is what you're saying.
Yeah, we deal with that.
And you saw a significant increase in the refrigerated van.
Yeah, we ran out of supply in that sector very quickly. I mean, if you order from Carrefour,
Abdullah with us, not Abdullah.
If you order during the lockdown from Carrefour, your order will come 2 weeks after. Now they increase the fleet. Maybe they double, I don't know, but they increase the fleet a lot. And all the retailers increase the fleet. So after the lockdown, they will give you next day delivery. But in the other side of refrigerated trucks that are 40 foot, there is a low demand comparing with other years. So summer is a high season for those type of trucks, and now there is a low demand on that. It's also very difficult to travel to Jordan by road because Jordan is a fruits and vegetable sourcing market by road, and that is a bit difficult now. On top of the pandemic, came a disruption of summer and Eid and Ramadan. All this in the same time. It's really like the situation is so dynamic, very, very dynamic.
Let's talk more about technology for the transportation industry that is under pressure now, all right? And you're a technology company that is built to help these industries digitize, especially that they're not the typical fancy industries. We're looking at trucks, products, warehouses, drivers, pen and paper, WhatsApp, just things like this. So tell me more about, because you're a marketplace, right? You're connecting the person who wants to buy the service and the provider of the service. So tell me more about your struggles before COVID. So do you have these typical cases that says you're trying to sell them something and they're like, it's not for us, it's not now, tomorrow, and now they knock on your door saying, Sebastian, you talked to us about this internet thing, what can we do together? So tell me more about scenarios, without sharing names, scenarios about industries and so on, about what was the behavior before and after, and is this in your favor and how?
Yeah, it is in our favor. I can't say we're doing more volumes than before, but we're doing much better than others in our industry, much better than other industries. So, if I look around, yes, I feel blessed by this situation. But if I look back into what my projections, volumes are lower. The problem that we are fixing is pricing, and we can predict the future availability of trucks. In a dynamic environment, this is impossible for a non-digitalized company. It's totally impossible. They could operate before the pandemic because there were less disruptions. So price is almost the same, Dubai to Riyadh, for the year around, maybe.
Just a few dirhams here, a few dirhams there. They know that in August it's a little bit less.
Yeah.
And they do it a bit more. It's just some
so they can manage. But now when, on the same day, availability change, rule, things, okay, there is trucks who can go to Saudi, but only with food. But then there's no trucks to come back to bring the goods from Saudi here. Then this is a dynamic. But when is this dynamic happening? After a few days, because there's still, in the first few days, there's still a lot of trucks in Saudi that can bring goods. So after a few days, there's a price change. So we're much better than others in predicting.
But wait, what you're saying, Sebastian, is with the border change that you open up with, is you're saying that you have to keep track of both legs now, right? So you sent an item to the border and it offloaded the item. So now it's available and empty for you to use. And then there's another truck that went from this border side to the other side and so on. So you're keeping track of both legs. Is this what you're saying? And you're using
not today. Not today.
Okay.
Not today, but yeah, that's one improvement that we can do, being connected with more transportters.
Okay.
What I'm,
but what you're able to
saying,
get now
like,
is...
to decide the price, to decide how much a transporter will be willing to load for you in that day. For that, to decide that, you need to know how many transporters are available in that area for the destination that you need for.
Who decides on the price? Is it the supplier of the truck?
Yeah, I mean,
and he or she knows how to price it from the system.
We're a broker, so we negotiate with the transporters on the dynamic bidding. The prices and with the clients, we have kind of fixed prices. So by negotiating, by having a fluctuating rate with the transporters, we can be very efficient on our buying rate and mark up the profit.
Okay, that's tricky though, Sebastian, no? In such a dynamic environment.
It is if you don't have data to understand what's the price that the transporter is willing to load for.
If you had the chance to rebuild your company today from scratch, because this is a discussion I have with founders, it's a messy time, all right? And the recommendation I always tell them is, because we have to adjust to whatever business realities we're dealing with, if I was just to reset and say, I want to start from scratch today, what would my business look like? And this is how we will be able to get through this period, which is like a good year and a half still on and off. So how are you, or would you restructure the offering or what you're building?
Interesting question. I'm not prepared for this. I think to be open for changing everything, anytime, with any cost. So to have the cost less when you change something in the company. I change quickly. I'm focused on hygiene sector, which is in demand also in this time, and it's not free border crossing for them. I did that very quickly. I was, so in a way, I was set up in this way so I can change quickly because I don't have assets, I don't have trucks specialized on an industry. I don't own any trucks. Maybe I was slowing down if I knew what's happening. I was slowing down on expansion because we just doubled the team in February.
Of course, that's how it happens, huh? Just before the world crashes, you double your expenses.
So that maybe will be instead of doubling, maybe just increasing by 25%. But they help each of those new hires help us to get through the pandemic and to break even during this time. It's an amazing achievement, and it's what else I would I would put aside some cash. Put aside some cash.
That's tough though, because something I've been trying to do personally as well is to keep 6 months of payroll, and it's difficult. You have to fight for it to keep it because you have to balance growth. So as you said, do we want to grow and add new things, and then you need to balance compensation and things and expenses and things like this. So it's,
but when you look back, you'll say because now you can look back and say, but the margin these times are higher than they were in January. So now you will see those margins that were in January small. So it's better you keep the cash than getting it sunk into the market for that low margin. You keep it for when you can have more bucks per dollar, how is it said. But at that point, no, because you're blind by the opportunities and you jump all in. What else? Maybe I train. We have like a week until we figure out how to work from home. So that is something that maybe we could train, like, okay, now it's Saturday, let's work this Saturday, or let's work Thursdays from home. It's optional to come to the office. But again, it sounds crazy now to take this decision in the, but if I was, training people to work from home, then also will be easier, the transition. So it took us like a week until we made a transition. But now I think the big tragedy will be when we start working again from the office. That's when the real depression will be, not everyone is not, no one is used now to sit in the office.
Are you going to change how your staff are working from home after the pandemic?
So for us, we are a vital sector, so we could work from the office 24/7. We didn't have a restriction, even during the lockdown. We could have a work permit 24/7. But only the most important stuff is in the office. So like 30% through rotation is in the office, and we maintain this also through Ramadan. But we're planning to increase that number after Eid.
Okay.
So one thing maybe 50, 60.
I'm theorizing, and that falls in line with many of my other theories that I planned for, is I'm hoping to do 1 or 2 days working from home after the pandemic. I know this won't happen, but just, those are things that I'm planning to do, for example, to try out. So it's a combining up, or it could be, it's not a full day, maybe an afternoon. So, but those are, I have to wait and see, because I doubt.
You should do this. Though now maybe you don't want to say it online, so your employees hear it.
No,
but,
I'm fine.
So I've done with.
I was trying more from a personal perspective. I'm trying to see that I was able to be productive and to work out with everybody else. Can I do this on a Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, where I'm with my kids in the afternoons and working as well? Is this something practical I can do or not? Now I say yes, but before now I tried to do this and I couldn't. I always have meetings in the afternoon.
So I took this risk before with a few of my colleagues, who were like with young children or living far. So I took this and it was a good result. So the end product, but the company has to be set up on goals, not on task and repetitive work. So if it's set up on goals and these are the goals that you need to reach weekly or are assigned to you, and then regardless where you physically sit, you're still gonna do most of the work on the computer.
True. I'd like to open up for some questions, Sebastian. We have a couple of questions. I'm going to bring in also Abdullah. If you have your audio running, I can bring you in to ask you a question. So Abdullah was asking how you'd be able to negotiate the prices with truck owners, given that they're getting volume from external sources. Second, what is the best method to gain traction for logistics marketplace? And third, what are your expectations on how the logistics market size will change post-COVID? And Abdullah also has a particular interest in refrigerated trucks and transportation as well. So Abdullah, you have the floor.
Hi Sebastian, how are you? How you doing? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you very well.
Okay, Sebastian. So basically, by introducing myself, I run a refrigerated marketplace, last mile delivery marketplace in the UAE. Just recently, February started. So basically, we just to summarize the questions, these are the most critical ones. So now the let's say the delivery companies, they have volumes increasing massively in the COVID situation. How would you negotiate with them the dynamic prices that you just mentioned, since they are getting this amount of volume? Can you just shed lights upon this area exactly?
Mm-hmm. So how do I negotiate with the transporter?
Yes.
Yeah, the price will go up. Obviously, when the category is in demand, the price goes up, and it went up a lot. So we just have to pay more in order to secure the capacity. But then you have to increase the price also with the client.
Mm-hmm.
Signing longer term contract with the transporter on fixed, so like on monthly basis, that also helps, because when the prices are increasing month by month in a category, then it's in your advantage to have long-term pricing. When pricing are decreasing, then it's not in your advantage.
Mm-hmm.
So monthly agreement was for domestic transport on refrigerated truck. We push suppliers on monthly agreement.
So you're saying monthly agreements are better than short agreements, or sorry, long agreements?
Yeah, because now there is demand, and when there is demand, you want to secure capacity at whatever cost, but you need to secure capacity because you're going to charge anyway more yourself as well. And if you go in a monthly agreement, once he started the month, he will not get out of the monthly agreement. He can't get out of the monthly agreement because he will, will lose the work that he done up to that point. If you go on spot during this increased demand, you'll always fight for every day. You're going to fight with other customers for this capacity. And so when you're going to fight, you actually increase the price.
Mm-hmm. So also one of the challenges that we were facing, honestly, once the massive volume of orders has increased, what happened? The transporter had made his leakage. So instead of using, for example, us as a brokers, he would first get the orders from the company, the customer, the client, and then he will automatically, for future orders, connect with them directly for massive orders and eliminate us from the middle. So this leakage has been happening specifically in the pandemic situation.
So I don't fully agree here. This risk is always, so you need to figure out a model which keeps you, which eliminates this risk. I've tested, I think, so in my case, it's on the customer side. So if you have customers that are willing to work with individual drivers and with small companies directly, then you are exposed to this risk. If you have customers who are not, who have like a complicated and standardized procurement process on which these transporters cannot adhere, insurance and so on, then you're safe of this. So the role of the broker is not for every shipment. There are shipments where no one really likes the middleman, the broker. So then there are shipments which will be done directly, transported to customers, and these are usually small companies, small and medium companies, spot shipments, this type of. So those are off limits for brokers, in my opinion.
So you're saying,
regardless, it's pandemic or, sorry.
So you're saying, you know, so what can he do? Because you're saying that leakage will happen. It's inevitable. So is there something that he can do to, because many founders have this issue, any marketplace, if it's transportation or other than that, they always have leakage. What measures, what's one measure that you've done in the past, in your experience, that has helped reduce that leakage that Abdullah and other founders can benefit from?
So I can't say what I've done. It took me a lot of money and mistakes to find out. But I can say, you know, in other industries where there is a broker who's brokering car rentals, for example. Yeah, you're a marketplace for car rentals. And the peer-to-peer car rental, for example. I want to rent a car from Ayman Itani. I can rent because I know already. I can, or maybe first time I rent it through the marketplace, and then I can just rent it from him directly. But they put in US an insurance that is a product specialized for this 1 day or 5-day rental. And Ayman don't want to rent his car to me without an insurance. And he cannot get this insurance. It will be too difficult for him to go to an insurance broker to get an insurance for 5 days. And this is enabled already by the flood. So that's a locker or a stickiness factor. So the customer will not go outside the platform. So that's one thing, you know, that I can say. An example that a broker or a marketplace need to find ways to lock in himself in the transaction.
So it's inevitable to have leakage, and there he has to provide value on one side to the customer, and another side to the supplier, extra value that he will get, and even those who don't appreciate or value that they will leak.
Yeah, because you're not only adding value, you're also adding margin, cost. So the value that you add, or at least the perceived value of what you add, has to be higher
than the margin than
the margin that you put. The margin is very obvious. It's very obvious. Once they met each other, after a name, it's next. They will ask how much you make. I mean, all of us ask Uber in the first few trips, how much your Uber charging you for this trip? I know, I asked on my second trip, you know.
I do even more than that, Sebastian. What some of the drivers, what I do is I go through, you know, they allow me to go through their app. So I look at it more, not just from the monetary perspective. I want to see how they communicate with them, what are they transparent about, and so on. And you can see that. So you show that it's a 16 dirhams, 20 dirhams ride, and they show them the number of rides, and they have graphs and so on. So it's pretty driver centric. So it's a decent driver app that shows them their hours and what they're working on and so on. So it's solid. It's a solid approach there. Yes.
Yeah, now it is. But like in the beginning, there were cases that were like when we changed the route, we have another. We need to drop someone in another place, and it was he the one who ordered. We need to drop him first, and then that gave an error. There was a
also
learning
the drivers
process.
always trying to slip us their number to call them and so on.
So that also, even that, every driver in the beginning, if you remember, they were giving business cards, and you can call me directly, but you will not call because it's the fragmentation is very high. You will call, but he's not available in your area, or he's busy or he's sleeping, or it's not. They could not. It could not. Didn't work, but they tried. They tried. So they will try the leakage. Or how you call it. They will also. Everyone hates the middleman. I also I stayed away from the sectors in which leakage was
common.
High. Yeah.
Abdullah, do you have any further questions for Sebastian?
Just thank you so much for your time, Sebastian. Just one last question: is there any expectations on the logistics market in general on the growth post-COVID? Or still the whole situation is really
it won't be more than before. It won't be more than so people stopped to consume unnecessary things, stopped to buy unnecessary things. So they just buy what's necessary and what's important for them. And people in the world were buying a lot of unnecessary things, more than what's necessary. I think maybe, 60, 70% of what we're buying, we don't actually need. And now because they stopped buying that, they will stop producing that. They will stop ordering transport for whatever is related with that. So, but this is macro economy. In region speaking, if there will be population migration back to their home country, then yes, we'll have less volumes because many sectors are directly connected with the number of people that are living in an area, especially FMCG. Then there will be also capacity will be less. So at the renewal, the number of a lot of trucks, when there is the renewal in the next year, they will not renew. So companies who has 10 trucks, they will renew only 5 trucks of them on the license renewal, for example. So the capacity also will be less. They will react to this low demand.
So it will be not.
It won't stop. So transports will never stop. So it won't stop like other industry that stop now. I won't name it because you know it, but it won't stop. Fully stop. It will never fully stop. Even in the crisis before, transporters suffered. It went low, the volumes. It happened the same. People bought only what they need. They didn't stop buying what they don't actually need. And but it never stopped. They still moved.
It survived.
Yeah, the good ones survived.
Thank you so much for your time. That's it for me.
Thank you, Abdullah. We have a couple of questions from our colleague Samir. He has 2 questions that are somehow related. He's saying that during the pandemic, what has been the most affected part of your business, and what are changes that you needed to do in order to avoid or reduce the amount of losses? That's one part of the question. And the second part of the question saying is, working from home, if that's been working for you, would you looking at doing that to reduce costs of rent and so on, and like this after the pandemic?
Yeah, so the first question for us, what product were in demand? With the hygiene. We were already good in that sector, and we've moved quickly, adapted quickly to the need of that sector. So we managed to get new customers in that sector without meeting them. So we've done very well in the hygiene sector. But it's specific for my company. Food sector also was in demand, and grocery delivery and online this parcel delivery were all in high demand. Then yes, rent. I was just about to renew my rental, and I received the contract for. I told you I doubled the team, so
Yes.
I doubled the space. So
Obviously,
I added 3 more offices, to 3 more rooms to our office, and then I put on hold the whole contract, and I canceled because it's enough for for now.
Even when you come back? Oh, because you're still going to have the 30% rotation. You have that 50% rotation.
I have to say, but yeah, it's a cost. Let's see if we afford that. It's a cost. I'm expecting real estate to go down, the rent to go down lower a little bit. So I try to get benefit of that.
Of course. No, I understand that. Thank you. That addresses the second part of the question. Rita had a question. My colleague Rita had a question about the orders. The orders being less. I think you addressed something around that being that the borders are not as flexible as before, and that the volume, not necessarily in your business, but you've seen the volume of domestic. So the volume of intercountry has decreased, and the volume of domestic has also decreased as well, but it has increased in other aspects such as the refrigerated vans and so on. Correct?
Yeah, but it was shifted from 40 footers refrigerated trucks to refrigerated vans. But in the end, we consume the same amount of food in the city. We didn't consume more overall.
Okay, I see. All right, Sebastian. So the key elements that you focused on is that with COVID, you're looking at the border control has changed. So border control has changed where a driver cannot cross borders like he or she used to do before. They arrive at the border, and then there's an exchange that happens there, and then another driver picks up the items and they move there. That's one significant change.
But it's not for all the borders. It's just an example. It's not for all the borders. It's not for all the items. It's not for. It's just like I gave you an example. But yeah, there was disruption in all the borders coming from the checking the temperature, just checking the temperature with the driver. Even that added delays in borders in the early beginnings. Yeah.
Okay, and the second part, also you talk about how modes of transportation within the GCC that were not common, such as from Jabal Ali to Riyadh, a lot of it used to be done by land transport. Now you see a portion of that for some products that go by sea via Dammam. So that's also a different mode of transportation for the products that has emerged due to the COVID crisis. And you also pointed out that this pandemic has also highlighted how industries are so interconnected. So you said that without ink you can't have milk because you cannot print the covers and the branding to put on the bottle in order to do that. So that's how they're all very interconnected. And you also pointed out that the refrigerated trucks are having a moment now due to the increased delivery to the consumer that was not there before. So those are the key aspects that I've summarized from the insight that you've shared in the transportation industry that's affected with COVID. Thank you, Sebastian, for being with us today. I know that the transportation industry that you're in needs the digitization. Even with COVID, I'm pretty sure that many are still waiting to say it's okay, it's going to pass. I don't need that technology aspect or that SaaS aspect or that visibility and dynamic pricing that we provide and so on. So that friction will always be there in any industry.
No, they need. We've contacted from all over the world to license our software, and this is on fast track now because of the pandemic. It's on fast track. This is another change globally that I've seen. So people are forced to digitalize now. Before it was like, how much money I save if I digitalize, and you can't save in the beginning on that. It will actually cost more, and you need to digitalize if you want to survive. That's but now they realize this was a mistake for the one who didn't digitalize anything.
And the message I want to tell you and other founders as well who are using technology to digitize certain industries, you will always have people who will never go through things. So I even had a discussion not long ago with a restaurant owner in the months within COVID. He asked me, so Ayman, you still think I should go long term and I should sell online? I was like, what are you waiting for? It's like months in. What have you been selling for the last 6, 7, 8 weeks? Your business is completely physically there, and he's still pondering, he's still thinking. So that, for example, is never a customer of a digitized platform. I don't think that you should ever waste time or energy with selling to such components. And then you have the others who have been on a 3 to 5 year long-term plan. They had to act now, and those are the ones that you mentioned that before now was like, yes, do I save and I'll put this in my 5-year budget, my 5-year roadmap, and so on. But now it's like, this year we have to get this done to accommodate. So those were an eventual customer. Now the sales cycle is shorter. Thank you, Sebastian, for being with us, and best of luck for you.
Thank you, Ayman.